This episode is part of a special bonus series presented by Jotform. Jotform Enterprise provides an all-in-one solution to streamline administrative tasks, enhance community engagement, and foster innovation. Using their no-code drag-and-drop forms and workflows, your teams can securely collect and store data, automate routine tasks, and collaborate on team resources. Educational institutions are also eligible for a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. jotform.com/enterprise/education. And a quick note, this episode is part of a special bonus series. You can find the video version exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. This week's episode is titled Classroom Management Challenges in a Digital Age with Laurie Guyon, and I'm excited to welcome Laurie back to the podcast. Laurie is a New York educator who I've known for a long time, and she spends a lot of time working with teachers and students. I knew she would have plenty of classroom management tips and tricks to share, and this conversation is packed with ideas. Let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Laurie. I'm so excited to have you back and to chat about classroom management challenges in our digital age, if you will. So before we jump into all of that, can you let listeners know a bit about your role in education? What does your day-to-day look like?
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Monica. My name is Laurie Guyon. My role is as an instructional coach type of position. My title is Lead Coordinator of Instructional Technology Programs. I work at WSWHE BOCES, which is a BOCES in upstate New York. My role really is helping teachers with technology in the classroom. So every day I'm either running a professional learning session or I'm pushing into classrooms, modeling, presenting on anything to do with the tech tools that we have in today's world. I'm also on the NICE board. I'm the Capital Region Director. I have a book called Smile Learning, where we talk about leveraging the power of educational technology. And I have a podcast of my own called Smile Factor. So yeah, anything to do with technology, I'm in.
Yeah, right. And I'm glad you mentioned NICE. I've seen you speak there a million times, probably, right?
Sure.
I don't know how many times we've both been there together. And that's one of the reasons that, I reached out to you around this topic is because I know that you have such a wide range of experiences looking at classroom technology integration, and you're having lots of conversations with educators in classroom settings around making the most, of the digital tools that they have access to. So what are some common classroom management challenges you see in classrooms that are tech rich or have lots of technology?
Yeah, I was just in classes yesterday. As a matter of fact, I was in with 7th and 8th graders in a STEM type of class, a Project Lead the Way, kind of program where they were learning about sensors on different tech tools. So they asked me to come in, bring a whole bunch of different tools, and we explored sensors on all of them. And what you notice is that students really, they enjoy using technology, but they really want the hands-on experiences too. So I think when you're thinking about technology in the classroom, what I'm kind of seeing is finding that balance between what to do with the technology and what to do off the technology can sometimes be difficult, especially, this teacher happens to be a high flyer using all of the different tech, but sometimes that's hard for teachers to try to find that balance. Yeah. And then for students, I think the big thing for them is how they're using the technology. They're much more likely to take out their Chromebooks or iPads or whatever if they know they're going to do something that's really engaging and something that they're interested in versus a pure substitution type of experience where they're like, we do this every day kind of thing, where it gets that repetition that they don't want. So yeah, those are the big ones I could say is definitely, how the technology is being used and, how much the students are interested in doing whatever it is that you're asking them to do.
Yeah. And so much of that, takes planning and take some routines, really having a feel for what is going to, not just be something like novel or bright and shiny that won't last, right, in terms of engagement, but really ask for kids to get in the zone, right, whatever that might mean, right, in a particular learning environment. So when it comes to, setting up for success there, can you share some strategies that have helped teachers, streamline their organization, like maybe managing lesson materials or even tracking student progress in these digital spaces?
Yeah, I find the most successful classrooms with that management is like you kind of already started to say it. It's the routine. It's the students know as soon as they walk in the door what's expected of them. Not that the repetition is, the same always, but that there are certain routines that are set up that help students know what's going to happen when they come in. I think it lessens their anxiety too, if they know what they're going to be doing when they come in the door. So even when I was in the class, I taught sixth grade for many years in every subject. At some point, by the time I left the class, I was only teaching English, but I taught it through the computer science and engineering lens because we did a lot with technology in the class. But I found that having that task list, having something that when they come on, they know this is exactly what is expected for them. It could be something you use a technology tool, where you have some sort of display every day, or you have just right on the whiteboard, here are the things that we're going to be doing over the course of the time you're with me today. I find that really helps students kind of get right into whatever it is you want them to do and get them excited about, if you have something on that list and they're like, well, I'm not sure what that is. They get excited and they want to know what it is, right? I had this really neat experience. I was pushing into a fifth grade class. And when I opened the door, I was rolling, some things behind me, and then students started to applaud. And I looked at the class, and I hadn't been in this classroom before, but I had seen them other years and in other classes. And I said, why are we applauding? And they said, because we knew that you coming was going to be something fun. And we knew that whatever tech you were bringing, we were going to have a really good time with it. So I think that you could build that excitement by setting up those routines of this is what's going to happen, and here's what you could expect while you're with me.
Yeah. And just, it's so interesting as you're framing that because, right, as a classroom teacher, I started, my career with an overhead projector.
Sure. I was chalkboard. So
right. Yeah. Right. So it just, such a big shift in terms of both of our, careers and what's available, right, for kids to use. And so, those best practices that we know around classroom management in general, I think you really can scale, right, to these different situations, particularly where there's something that might pose a little bit of a distraction or might, right, help students, right, refocus, right, into something else that they're doing, right? There's a lot of variables when you're bringing anything new, right? Even if it's a whole tub of math manipulatives, right, into a classroom, that's going to introduce like new variables, right? But I like how you're, emphasizing leaning into those best practices, like posting expectations, being really clear and transparent on what's about to happen. And that can really, that structure can really set up kids for success when something, new is taking place or something that they are clapping, right, and pumped up about. Right. So, how can educators balance the benefits of using technology thoughtfully, right, with the need to limit distractions, right, and keep kids focused and all the, the real everyday challenges that we have in classrooms?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I like I said, I was in a class yesterday, and just the way the teacher set up that routine, as soon as they came in, there was a seating chart. The students know that every beginning of the week, the teacher sets up a new seating chart. So they know that they're going to have like this random selection and the students' names are going to be on the screen. Uh-huh. So immediately they come in, they see where they are, they go find their table and they sit down. And then right from there, they're ready to go. They know to pull out their Chromebook and they get started. And I think that that's what matters, that we make sure that they know, okay, this is what's going to happen the minute I come in, because they can get going. Sometimes though, those Chromebooks can be a distraction. So again, I think with that letting people know, letting the students know you come in, you don't need your Chromebook right away. I taught with iPads in the class, and I used to tell them apples up whenever I wanted their attention, right? I'm sure you did the same, right? Uh-huh. So we used to do that kind of thing. Same thing, shut the Chromebook when you need their attention. And I think it's, if you do that every time, if you put those expectations in place saying, all right, when I need your attention, I need you to close the lid or, flip it over, whatever it happens to be. I think that can be really helpful. And I think when you're on, the devices itself, what you're doing matters. I think that if you're always doing the same thing with students, like watching a video and answering questions, if they know they're going to do that every day, it can get a little monotonous. Then you might have the one student who starts to go off to something else. I saw a student yesterday, actually, we were getting them logged into a program that they were going to use with one of the robots. And it was taking a little longer than we had planned to kind of get some of the students on. They were running into some problems loading up the app. And so there was one student I walked by and he was definitely doing something other than what we were on. And I was able to ask him, like, do you have it ready? And he said, yes, I'm just going to do this until you're ready to tell me the next step. I'm like, okay. Then he's not distracted. He knows where we are, but he's also making good use of his time. And I appreciated that. He was like, I know this is what I have to wait for the next step. But he also was, going off to something else. You had to make sure that when we did get to the next step, he was ready to re-engage. And I think you just have to have that, building that relationship so that students know that this is what's expected.
Right. And having that balance of like setting everyone up, right? What does it mean if we're on pause for a second? What does it mean if I get a phone call, right? Or there's like something that happens in a classroom setting, like how are we going to react to that? So, what a great example of just setting expectations, thinking on, what it might look like if someone is working a little quicker or needs a little bit more time, so that they are still focused when it's time to bring everyone back together. And, in the examples you gave, Laurie, clear communication was a big part of it.
100%.
Making sure kids understand the structure and the expectations, a huge part, right, in classroom management, particularly, right, in digital spaces. A quick note from the presenter of today's episode, Jotform. Jotform Enterprise lets you build a form in minutes. Student survey forms, homework submission forms, online quizzes, and so much more. You can start from scratch, or if you want to get a head start, check out their collection of free form templates designed with teachers, schools, and districts in mind. Learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise. Head to their website to learn more. Jotform.com/enterprise/education. So do you have any routines or methods or recommendations for managing communication with students and families, right? So these kind of other folks, right, who might need an update on what's happening with devices.
Yeah, it's funny. I go back to yesterday. After I was done with those classes, I actually met with teachers after school, so with the department heads in a middle school, because they were concerned about how communication was going out. They felt like the parents were hearing information from different aspects and that students weren't 100% sure where to check for their work, like what to actually do. So we talked about exactly that. How can we make our communication very clear and consistent? And what we kind of agreed together was all of us are doing it in different ways, right? So my class might run my classroom this way and the other teacher might do it a different way. But for the students, that can be really confusing. And for parents, it's even more confusing if they have multiple places to find that information. So again, I do think you have to streamline that. You have to be very clear saying, this is how we're going to do that as a team. If the students see more than one of the teachers, and if it's a contained classroom and you're the only communication between the students and the parents, making sure that they know exactly where to go. You're not changing halfway through. It's kind of like, you wouldn't start on day one with 15 different tech tools with a student, right? It'd be just so overwhelming. We know that by the end of the year, they probably could fly between them, no problem, but you have to build up to that. Same with communication. You have to start with something small, something that is biteable, that you can say, all right, this is where you're going to go. And then from there, you can kind of build on it. I was fortunate when I was in the classroom that we would do not so much the open house. The open house was more about like other things, but I would do a parent night very early on where I'd invite them in to learn how the students are using their devices. I would invite the parents to come in with their students' devices, made sure that there was no homework, that the kids weren't stressed that they were being taken away from their device. And then we would walk through the different programs that we were going to be using so the parents can see what the students see. And I think, you don't have to do a parent night. It could be a video now. It could be a little bite-sized, memo. It doesn't have to be a full-fledged meeting, but something that says, here's what to expect, for you and your students.
Those are such great examples, and I think really actionable for listeners too, and what it means to make sure communication is clear and consistent for families, right? So one thing might be, right, setting up that night where everyone comes together, right? Or maybe in the middle of the school day or whatever is right, in terms of scheduling, and letting parents see what these things are that they're going to hear about, right? They're going to hear about it from their child. They're going to see it in a newsletter mentioned probably, right? So giving them that context is huge for the communication piece, but then also really committing to not overwhelming people from the start. And you made a great comparison to what we would do with students, which is not give them all the things, right? But layering on, right, over the course of the school year, right? You want families to actually read that newsletter or actually open up, right, that parent communication app, or to know exactly what to fill out and where to go to get that link, right? So I think that's just such a great example of making sure that from the jump, right, from the beginning of the school year, or maybe if you're doing a reset in the middle of the year, right, you're trying to make things simple, for families. So, if a teacher is looking for, maybe they're using a lot of tech tools in their classroom and, they just want to make sure that there's a quick win, right? Or something simple, right? Do you have any quick wins or simple types of tools that you would recommend a teacher try out? Maybe if they're, concerned about classroom management, keeping that in mind.
Yeah, I think, again, like you said, it's starting small, start with what you have, and then also take a look at, sometimes there are many tools that do the same thing or similar things. We don't have to use all of the things. And so I think, when you're thinking about those classroom management pieces, anything that you can have where it consolidates, the information, like a Google Classroom, right? Where you're going to be able to have a calendar and you're going to be able to have a to-do list and, using those tools. And you have to teach students the structures. They don't know how to use a calendar. We used to open up our planners, right? And have them fill it out every day. It's same idea. You need to teach them what to do and where to look. As far as like the quick little things, I would start with things that are engaging to students, whether it's a gaming program where they get to do the interactives, or it's a platform that allows for the students to, where there's give and take. I think a lot of times when we put our students on technology, it's a consumable. But anytime you can get the students communicating and collaborating and creating, that's where you're going to get those wins. And that's where you're going to get that engagement. You're less likely to have a student who decides to go off to a different tab if they find what they're doing engaging, right? And there are tools that will show you if the student has gone on, right? There's lots of those kind of screen watching type of tools that are available that can do that. But you're not going to get that distracted student if what you're doing is, if they see purpose in it, right? We often talk about bringing in those real world scenarios. So like a gaming platform, like let's say quizzes, for example, that one, right? It allows you using AI to create real world scenarios for each of the questions. The students are going to be more engaged in answering those questions because they can see the real world purpose to them. And they can also then, there might be competitions, or at least they're engaged in a certain way because they're doing some give and take. And I think that really matters.
Yeah. And just, I love how you emphasize some of the things that keep it simple for someone, right? So setting those expectations, having that intention of why we're doing something, but then also maybe stepping back and saying, I could do this with a few different tools, right? How can I choose something, or, how can I evaluate my tool belt to make sure there's not so much overlap? And then I'm using something that is multi-purpose, or that I could put into a few different parts of my day or parts of my week, right? Or maybe something that they've seen before, in other areas of instruction. So, when we think about classroom management, Laurie, one thing I think back to as a classroom teacher that was a struggle for me was making sure students were engaged when we were in small groups. I taught in a 5th grade classroom for several years where I would have kids in stations or working independently while I was pulling a group out. So how do you see digital tools helping with differentiation, right? And those moments where you might address the diverse needs of students in a classroom setting?
Yeah. And I feel like that's the big question right now, right? Differentiation, personalizing learning. I hear that a lot when I go to conferences. For me, I think AI has opened up that world for us. I think it's so much easier to differentiate now. I'll give another example. I was in a 7th grade Spanish class. I don't speak Spanish, but the students were learning how to order food in a cafe was kind of the goal of the day, is like to practice their food words. They still had their paper packet, right, with all that information in it. And the teacher asked me to come in and help the students practice. And so I set up, like you're saying, some stations. We had one station where the students were on an AI platform. We use School AI for this one, where they were able to chat with somebody in a Spanish cafe. So they could answer in both Spanish or English, and it would reply in the same way. And they can convert between one language to the other at the level that they were at. The teacher then could have a whole dashboard where they're seeing the full conversations that each student is having with that AI tool. But it also gave AI I think they call them highlights or headlines, something along those lines, that you get some information as how the student is doing with it. And then it also has this whole other section that says, hey, here's a little red flag, like somebody is saying something. Like I was doing this also with students that were practicing like for a job interview. Sure. And one of the students was talking with the AI tool in the interview, and they asked, how do you deal with difficult customers? And she said, well, you kill them with kindness. But because she used the word kill, it red flagged it on AI. And so, this red thing pops up on the screen and the teacher's like, oh, well, that's okay. Like, I get why they use the word, right? But for AI, it was a red flag. For the Spanish class, there was one boy who kept asking for 40 glasses of water. And so it popped up saying, I think the student needs redirection, right? So the teacher was able then to, come from the group she was with and go over to that group and say, what's going on? How come you're doing this? And he said, well, I can't think of any other words. And she immediately was like, where's your packet? Let's pull this out. And she was able to redirect. And if you had just looked at the class, if you were observing the class and you were working with a small group in one corner and you looked at him in the other, he looked fully engaged. So you would never have known that he needed redirection if you didn't have that tool. And while that was happening, there was another group that was playing Jenga with me. It was I always number Jenga tools, Jenga blocks. There's 52 or 54, depending on your set. Yeah. And each one have a number. I use AI to generate questions, and then the students answer the question based on the number they pull out. So we always did that as one of them. And then another group was working on another tool. They were using Padlet to actually create rooms and then describing them using their describing words. So lots of different things are happening there, and you could differentiate so well with just a couple, easy to use tools that give you so much insight on how your students are doing.
Yeah, all of those examples really give a teacher a window into what's happening. And that really comes back to this idea of managing a classroom with lots of technology, right? Like I wouldn't know what everyone is working on in real time, right? Unless we were connected, right? In some sort of way. So just those are such good examples of ways that you can gather some actionable info, right? Some actionable data on what students are doing as you're addressing differentiation or differentiated instructional goals that can often present, a classroom management challenge. So, Laurie, as we look ahead, are there any trends in EdTech? Maybe this comes back to the AI of it all.
Sure.
That you think will shape how teachers manage their classrooms over the next few years?
The shift I'm seeing is that, and I don't know, maybe you've noticed it too, is we have to go back to the pedagogy, right? We have to go back to, what is good classroom routine? What is good classroom management? What does a good lesson look like? The tools are all there, and we just have to leverage them the right way. So I feel like the tools get rid of all the busy work, all the stuff that can take a lot of time. Like if I needed 54 questions in the past, I would have to figure out 54 questions. Now I can have them in seconds, right? So that barrier is gone with AI or whatever tool you want to use there. So now we can really focus on what we know really works in the classroom. I think it's a perfect time for us to revisit, the universal design for learning and blended learning and all of the things that we know are really good research-based strategies that we can use in the classroom. And I think that's the trend we're going to see now that a lot of the busy stuff can give us back that gift of time. That if you would ask me last year or the year before, what's the biggest, worry for teachers, it was time. We said that it just seems like everything's in fast forward. Now we can give back that gift of time because of the technology that's there.
Such a great point. When it comes to all the instructional planning, all the things that educators are working on that helps run, a smoother classroom, I think that efficiency, right, that we're going to get with some of these ed tech tools, streamlining different things that we do, is massive. So thank you so much, Laurie, for jumping in today, for sharing all of these great actionable strategies with listeners.
I'm happy to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Laurie shared so many great ideas. Let's finish up this episode with a few key points to make this EdTech easy. Clear routines help students thrive in tech-rich classrooms. Creative, collaborative tech use keeps students engaged. AI reduces busy work, freeing time for effective teaching strategies. Streamlined communication ensures everyone stays informed. Remember, you can find the show notes and the full list of resources from this episode by heading to classtechtips.com/podcast. A big thank you to Jotform, the presenter of today's episode, and this special series. If you want to watch the video version of this episode, you can find it exclusively on Jotform's YouTube network. Just head to YouTube and type Jotform in the search bar. To learn more about Jotform and how educational institutions can get a 30% discount on Jotform Enterprise, head to jotform.com/enterprise/education.